Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Krueger on the concurrent resolution.
So I just heard my colleagues say this is simple and it's independent. But I listened to the debate between my colleagues, Senator Gianaris and Senator Nozzolio, and clearly it's anything but simple. I've also read endless analysis since a year ago on this constitutional amendment. And you know, it gets pretty bad grades from the actual independent people out there. Senator Gerald Benjamin, in his analysis, graded it F on observance of the integrity of the state's regions. He graded it F on decision on districting should default to the state high court if the commission is not constituted or fails to act in a timely way. He graded it F on the criteria to be used established in the Constitution for redistricting in order of priority. He graded it F on commission decisions on districts.
Excuse me, Senator Krueger. Senator DeFrancisco, why do you rise?
I'm wondering if Senator Krueger would yield to a question.
Senator Krueger, do you yield to Senator DeFrancisco?
Just 1 minute, if that's okay with the senator. Thank you. Okay. I'm going on with Professor Benjamin's analysis. He starts to move up after grades at F on the criteria to be established in the state constitution for redistricting in order of priority, grades it an F on the commission decisions on districts being final when filed with the Secretary of State. We then get up to Ds on a series of proposals, finally up to a grade of C. And we actually get to a B and an A on a couple of minor issues at the end, but a recognized independent authority on the Constitution and on the districting process in New York has given it terrible grades. I will happily defer to Senator DeFrancisco for questions and then get back to talking on the bill, if I might, Mr. President.
Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, I would just have this question. Senator Krueger, how would you grade the Democrat majority in 2009 and 2010 on their redistricting efforts?
Through you, Mr. President. The Senate Republicans controlled this House for almost 70 years straight. They never addressed the fairness of districting in any of the 10-year periods during those approximately 70 years. We did control the House for approximately one of those 2 years until a Republican-led coup threw us all into chaos. And I will agree, during that short period of time, we did not get redistricting done. So I will agree, both parties in this House have been guilty of failing to get independent redistricting done in the history of this House. That, in my opinion, does not justify moving forward with a bad constitutional amendment when, in fact, we have no immediate deadlines. We have no redistricting scheduled to go forward for nearly another decade, and we really have the time, both of us in this House, both houses, to get this right. When you're going to amend the Constitution of a state, I believe you need to make sure you get it right before you change the Constitution.
Senator DeFrancisco.
Senator Krueger yield to another question.
Senator Krueger, do you yield?
Happily, Mr.
Senator
President.
yields.
Senator Krueger, I know you didn't get it done, and the Republicans didn't get it done, but during the years 2009, 2010, can you tell me what bills were introduced for redistricting by the majority who would have controlled redistricting if they kept the majority? What bills were introduced?
1 moment, I'll check with counsel, please. Reminding me, Mr. President, that at that time, you, Senator Valesky, carried a bill for independent redistricting that, in fact, Senator Gianaris, who was then an Assembly member, carried in the Assembly.
And would you yield to one last question?
Senator Krueger, do you continue to yield?
Yes,
and
sir.
can you
Senator
tell me when in 2009 and 2010, Senator Valesky's bill came to the floor for a vote?
Mr. President, may I ask you if you can answer that question for me?
I can answer it. It didn't come to the floor.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Krueger, I believe you'd like to continue to speak on the concurrent resolution.
Thank you. And I understand there was a hearing on that bill, but that did not come to the floor.
Excuse me, Senator Krueger.
Certainly.
Senator Nozzolio, why do you rise?
President, will Senator Krueger yield?
Senator Krueger, do you yield to
Sure, I'm
Senator
happy to
Nozzolio?
yield
Senator
to
Krueger
Senator
yields.
Nozzolio.
Senator Krueger, Mr. President, through you, is Senator Krueger, as she's quoting some
Professor Gerald Benjamin.
professor, is she familiar with Citizens Union?
I am familiar with Citizens Union, yes.
And would, Mr. President, Senator Krueger agree that Citizens Union has been at the forefront of reform of state government throughout its history?
No, not at every given point in history. In fact, Citizens Union, I would argue, was wrong on the support of the gerrymandering of the districts last year, and I believe they're wrong in their support of the constitutional amendment today.
Mr. President, I guess that is an answer to my next question, whether Senator Krueger is aware that Citizens Union has supported this constitutional amendment. It has supported this measure, supported your bill, and supported this measure as it's come before it.
Yes, I'm quite aware of that, and as I pointed out, I believe they're wrong here today on this issue. Does Senator Nozzolio have more questions?
I don't believe so. You may continue on the concurrent
Thank you
resolution.
so much, Senator Valesky. Again, for me, we could do better. We have time to do better. Again, and in fairness, unlike the deadlines we faced in 9 through 12, where there was imminent decisions to be made around redistricting, in 2013 they were not. And it is plenty of time for this state to get a constitutional amendment correct before we submit it, before we do second passage and we submit it. As we already heard during the earlier debate, there are some truly fundamental flaws in this constitutional amendment. It uses the Constitution to give political parties legal and express stranglehold on redistricting. It sets up an even number on the commission, which is likely to foster gridlock, as we have seen in this House, in order to allow the legislature to take over from the commission. It memorializes and requires a patronage-driven system for redistricting and puts that into the Constitution of the state of New York. It leaves confusing and unconstitutional provisions of the current Constitution in place, as we heard earlier in the discussions. In fact, I was quite surprised that the answers to some of Senator Generos's questions was, well, if that occurs, then we'll have to take it to the courts. Should we really pass a constitutional amendment where actually we're admitting on the floor of the Senate that a bunch of this stuff might have to go to the courts for an answer before we even put it into our Constitution? I think that should be reason enough to pull ourselves back and figure out how we get this right enough that we don't think it's going to end up into the courts once it's attempted to be implemented. It leaves, it doesn't expressly prohibit gerrymandering. I actually thought that was one of the fundamental assignments in working towards independent redistricting. Last year, we were accused of passing legislation that created the most gerrymandered districts in the Senate's history. Do we really want to change our Constitution and not expressly prohibit gerrymandering? It doesn't even establish a set number of Senate districts or clarify how the numbers is to be determined. Now, we've all gone back and forth in court several times around that one. You would think we would try to fix that going forward. And it does encourage the malapportionment between districts and regions. It might be hard to argue you could have a perfect process or even a perfect proposed amendment to the Constitution, but this one doesn't pass the smell test. And it's so complicated that I really worry about how we're going to explain it to voters in a referendum, what level of detail is going to be offered in the ballot to voters to decide on this. We are having trouble answering the questions here in the Senate. We are saying, well, that might have to go to court. Is that the kind of constitutional amendment we should be rushing forward, where again, technically, we are not on a deadline at this point in history? I will be voting no, Mr. President. Thank you very much.